Today we are sharing 4 anxiety-inducing true stories of heroic last stands made by individual soldiers. These stories range from World War I to modern times, with the last one even captured on camera, and they get progressively more intense, so stay with us until the end. Number 1. Henry Johnson. In May 1918, Private Henry Johnson and Private Needham Roberts were stationed in the Argonne forest in France, tasked with guarding a critical supply bridge to prevent the enemy from sabotaging this important position. In the early hours of May 15th, Johnson heard the sound of wire cutters as a large group of German trench raiders began breaching the barbed wire fence surrounding their outpost. He prepared for the attack, lining up grenades, and quickly threw the first one as rifle fire erupted around them. As he and Roberts peeked over the trench, they saw a wave of enemy soldiers flooding through the wire. With bayonets fixed, the German soldiers charged towards the two men. Johnson immediately began firing his rifle, trying to stop the advancing enemy. In the confusion of the firefight, Johnson ordered Roberts to run for help, but before he could, a grenade exploded, wounding Roberts in the arm and hip, leaving him unable to move. Johnson knew it was up to him to protect both his wounded comrade and the outpost. He threw every remaining grenade he had, while Roberts, though injured, helped by handing him more grenades and ammunition. But soon, the grenades ran out, leaving Johnson with only his rifle and bolo knife. As the Germans got closer, he fired his rifle until he was out of ammunition, then used it as a club in hand-to-hand combat. Even after being struck in the head by a German rifle, Johnson shook it off and charged with his bolo knife, determined to protect Roberts. He fought fiercely, slashing and stabbing his way through the attacking soldiers, refusing to let them take his friend. For nearly an hour, Johnson fought alone in close-quarters combat, fending off wave after wave of German soldiers. Eventually, he killed a German lieutenant, and at that moment, reinforcements arrived, causing the rest of the enemy to retreat. When the sun rose the next day, the battlefield was littered with German helmets, weapons, and blood, and it was estimated that Johnson had wounded or killed over a dozen enemy soldiers, despite being wounded 21 times himself. Johnson single-handedly prevented the Germans from breaking through the French line. For his bravery, he was awarded the Croix de Guerre, France's highest military honor, becoming the first American to receive it. In later years, his heroism was further recognized with the Purple Heart Distinguished Service Cross, and in 2015, he was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Number 2. Captain Ben L Salamon. Captain Ben L Salamon was a United States Army dentist, but due to the intense conditions during the Battle of Saipan, he served as a frontline surgeon. What he did on July 7, 1944, would go far beyond his call of duty and send chills down your spine. On that day, one of the largest Japanese banzai charges of the Pacific Theater began, with a force of between 3,000 and 5,000 soldiers. The massive assault quickly overwhelmed the defensive perimeter, and the entire line started to collapse. In the first minutes of the battle, Salamon's aid station began filling up with wounded soldiers as the Japanese continued their push. Despite the chaos, Salamon tried to keep treating the wounded, but as the perimeter fell apart, enemy soldiers breached the aid station. True horror began when one of the first Japanese soldiers bayoneted a wounded American lying on the ground. Salamon grabbed a rifle from a wounded soldier and from a crouching position shot the attacker. Then, more enemy soldiers entered the tent. Salamon immediately shot 2 more Japanese soldiers and attacked those crawling under the tent walls. He kicked the knife out of one enemy's hand, then killed him with a bayonet. After tackling another soldier, one of the wounded Americans managed to shoot him. Realizing the situation was hopeless, Salamon ordered the others to evacuate and reach the regimental aid station while he stayed behind to slow the enemy. He grabbed a rifle and rushed outside. The machine gun position that had been protecting them was overrun, with the crew killed at their post. Salamon took control of the machine gun and fired at the advancing Japanese, now at point-blank range. He held his position until the machine gun went silent. When American forces eventually retook the position, they found Salamon's body surrounded by 98 dead Japanese soldiers. His last stand bought enough time for many of the wounded to evacuate and survive. For his bravery, Salamon was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, one of only 3 dental officers in US history to receive the award. Number 3. John R Mckin. John Mckin was fighting in the campaign to recapture the Philippines from Japanese forces in 1945 during World War II. After a long shift at his machine gun post, he was resting just before dawn on May 11th. What no one noticed was that around 100 Japanese soldiers had silently crept close to their position during the night, preparing for a fierce sneak attack. Mckin woke up just in time to be struck on the head by the saber of a Japanese soldier. Dazed but still conscious, Mckin smashed the enemy with the butt of his M1 and immediately sprang into action. The battle that followed was brutal, with Mckin firing and fighting with bayonets and fists in close-quarters combat. He killed several enemies at close range, throwing grenades and firing at the advancing troops. As the fight continued, Mckin realized that all of his comrades were either wounded or had retreated, and the machine gun post had been overrun. Japanese soldiers were in the process of turning the machine gun against the American positions when Mckin leapt in and shot 7 enemy soldiers at point-blank range, eliminating 3 more in hand-to-hand combat. Though the machine gun was damaged during the fighting, Mckin continued to fend off the attackers with his M1 Grand, reloading and firing relentlessly. As grenades exploded around him and mortar fire targeted his position, Mckin's ability to stay calm under pressure, fire accurately, and fight hand-to-hand held the enemy back just long enough for reinforcements to arrive. When help arrived, they found Mckin had single-handedly stopped the attack, with 38 dead Japanese soldiers around his post and 2 more near a mortar position some 40 yards away. Mckin had saved his company from annihilation, and for his incredible actions, he was awarded the Medal of Honor. Number 4. John Chapman. John Chapman, a US Air Force combat controller, performed one of the most heroic one-man last stands in modern warfare during Operation Anaconda in 2002, and it was even caught on camera. On the night of March 4th, Chapman and a team of Navy SEALs were aboard a Chinook helicopter, heading to establish an observation post on Takur Ghar Mountain to monitor Al-Qaeda forces. Suddenly, the helicopter came under intense fire from rocket-propelled grenades and heavy machine guns. The blast caused Petty Officer First Class Neil Roberts to fall from the helicopter ramp, and the damaged aircraft was forced to crash land several miles away. Despite the dire situation, the SEAL team made the decision to return and recover Roberts. When they landed, they were immediately pinned down by heavy enemy fire from bunkers. Realizing that they were dead if they stayed there, Chapman charged through deep snow and enemy fire, straight towards an enemy bunker. He stormed inside, killing 2 Al-Qaeda fighters at point-blank range, allowing the rest of the team to move forward. By the bunker, they found the body of Neil Roberts, tragically killed by the enemy. Chapman and the SEAL team leader then targeted a second enemy bunker, but during the assault, Chapman was hit twice in the torso and collapsed. Believing him to be dead, the SEALs withdrew to regroup, but Chapman had only been unconscious. Wounded and alone, Chapman regained consciousness and found himself surrounded by insurgents. Despite his injuries, he picked up his rifle again and began fighting off the attackers. For nearly 40 minutes, Chapman held his position, exchanging gunfire with the enemy in what seemed like impossible conditions. At one point, he even engaged in hand-to-hand combat, killing an enemy fighter who had entered his bunker. As a quick reaction force approached, Chapman left his cover to draw enemy fire away from the incoming Chinook helicopter. His selfless actions saved lives of his comrades, but in the chaos, Chapman was shot through the heart, dying instantly. After a grueling battle, US forces finally took control of the hill. Surveillance footage captured Chapman's final stand, revealing his bravery and relentless fight against overwhelming odds. His actions directly saved many soldiers that day. In 2003, Chapman was posthumously awarded the Air Force Cross, which was later upgraded to the Medal of Honor in 2018. If you want to hear more incredible stories like these, let us know in the comments below.